I'm Lois McNamara, you know me, and I'm introducing my colleague, my friend Paul Licata. We both taught together at Valencia Community College. Now it's Valencia College in Orlando. And quite a few years ago, because we both had this interest in the Holocaust, we started talking about offering a course. Oh, okay. I knew that my department chair, I was in humanities, probably wouldn't approve a team teaching course. So I dragged my feet. But Paul was in the communications/English department, and he took the ball and ran with it and designed a course called the Holocaust Literature. Okay. And at first, I would do the lectures on the art, and that's not part of what's being presented today. But Paul did this course many times, and because he was doing it and educating students at Valencia, he was given 2 grants by the Holocaust Memorial Center in Maitland, and that money allowed him to travel to Europe and see more of the places that were associated with the Holocaust. So in addition to Auschwitz, Birkenau, that most of us have been to, he also visited Dachau, Theresienstadt, Sachsenhausen, and the Drancy is the place in Paris where they congregated Jews before they transported them to the camps, etc. So anyway, with no further ado, I will present to you my colleague Paula.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. I never speak that loudly. My wife can barely hear me sitting next to me, and tells me to speak up all the time. I am Paul Licata, and you can't. Okay, okay. Oh, so first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here today and letting me share this information with you. I'm hoping for me it's going to be cathartic, and for you, I'm hoping that it's going to be thought-provoking enough to have made it worth your while staying. I also would like to thank Holden Martin for the tech support and what he's doing even as we speak, and his having suffered through receiving about 5 different iterations of this presentation from day to day to day. I didn't get a nasty word back at all. I also want to thank Vicki and Jackie Davis, one for accepting the proposal to do today. It's changed a little bit from the original proposal, but I think it's more focused right now. And Vicki helping me get comfortable coming in here today, showing me what the room was going to look like. It was really very helpful, actually. But most of all, I have to thank my longtime friend and colleague, Professor McNamara, and her super husband, Bob, with whom I shared this presentation a couple of months ago. And I had been talking to a couple of my colleagues about ideas that seemed to be coming together between what I knew about the rise and fall of the Third Reich and the Holocaust and what was going on just prior to and post the election. When I mentioned the similarities to my colleagues, they initially said, it sounds good, but it seems like a reach. So, of course, that got me started, right? I went from there to start looking at what might be the same between what was going on then and what was going on now. And after some work, I came up with this title, Buckle Up. It's a bumpy ride from democracy to dictatorship to wherever we are now. It seemed for me that this was a critical moment in Germany. In the Weimar Republic, this is the government that took over after the fall of World War I. The Weimar government at the time was considered one of the most liberal, inclusive societies of the world, even more so than the United States. And I asked myself, what was it that could have brought a society like that to support a dictator who had already said that he wanted to overthrow the government that he wanted to lead? It didn't make much sense to me. So I wondered what brought us from here to Hitler to wherever we are today. I'm not sure what the trajectory is, but I think we've heard something this morning about what it seems like it's doing. So the first thing I looked at in terms of comparisons, and I'd like to emphasize, I'm really not trying to forward a position for one party or against another party. I'm really trying to look at what seems to be similar and sometimes what seems to separate them a little bit. So the first thing I looked at was the people themselves. And it is pretty well known to me, of course, that Adolf Hitler in 1933 was elected president of the Weimar Republic, which then was devolved into what became the dictatorship and which made him Führer. I know I'm missing the umlaut. But as a person, he was already convicted of insurrection. That is, in 1923, he and a number of other SA or other Nazi party members tried to overthrow the Weimar Republic in what's called the beer hall push in Munich. It didn't go well. He was caught, he was sentenced to 5 years in jail, and I think he wound up serving about 6 months before he was released and let go. He was also, in his Mein Kampf, a self-proclaimed racist, homophobe, white supremacist, and anti-Semite. I say those with some trepidation, but he said them with great pride. I'm sorry to say it. I was sorry to find it. But the truth is that our 45th and 47th president has some common characteristics as this other fellow. He is a convicted felon. Insurrection in Weimar was a felony as well. So Hitler was a felon, as it were. Trump, also a convicted felon, also investigated for his part in an insurrection. And he also, I'm sure you heard the same thing I did, I'll be a dictator on day one. Well, for me, this was just a pinch in the butt. It's too easy a comparison. There's got to be something different or something wrong with this comparison. So I looked on a little bit further. One of the things I realized was when Elon Musk donated or contributed his $270 million toward the end of Trump's campaign. Are we familiar with that in a little moment? Well, that rang a bell in my mind also because Hitler found himself in the same position in 1933 as he was running for president. About a month before Hitler was brought to office, his funds had run essentially dry. So this fellow, Hjalmar Schacht and Hermann Goering, the head of the Luftwaffe, organized a secret meeting of what were then the most moneyed people in Germany, the industrialists. And they convinced them to contribute to the Nazi campaign fund to get him through the election. Gustav Krupp, a major industrialist in Germany at the time, donated about 4,700,000 Reichsmark. Remember, they're not Deutschmark yet until later on. But this number, I would say, is a little bit vague. because not only did these industrials contribute to his campaign fund, they were also persuaded to donate unannounced amounts of money for Hitler's personal use without any accounting for it. Of the people who contributed to Hitler's campaign included IG Farben, or IG Farben. This is a chemical manufacturer in Germany at the time. I'm not sure if you know this or not, but they are also the providers of Zyklon B that was used in the extermination camps.
What is that?
Zyklon B is a fertilizer agent that if you open it to the air, it becomes a mist and you suck it in, and it actually, I think it binds to your iron molecules and you're gone in about 30 seconds. That's what they used to kill everybody in Auschwitz with, and some other camps. IG Farben was also, in addition to providing the Zyklon B, also took on 600 slave laborers from the camps. And the records indicate that of the 600 laborers they took on, only about 20 survived. Telefunken donated 35,000, that's communications company. And the one that really gets me is Bayer in a way. I'm going to have to come back to this. Bayer actually provided enormous amounts of materials and support to the Nazi Party that amounted to what some people are saying over $30 million. So kind of rang my bell, said Elon Musk. Yes, ma'am.
And maybe you get to this later, but IG Farben was later, after the war, split into several because they didn't want to have this as an entity. And one of those is BASF, which is still one of the...
That's correct. And one of the major donors to the Trump campaign, BASF.
Cover up all those donations, and those companies still at the top of the world.
Many of those companies remain there today. Daimler, Chrysler, Krupp is still around, and there was one just lost my mind. So I looked at Elon Musk's contribution to Trump's campaign, also rescued in the last month or so of the campaign period. And it said that he donated 270 million, but that number, like the Krupp number, is very amorphous. That is, he didn't donate the money to Trump himself. He donated the money through a number of political action committees. And one of those action committees, ironically, he called the RGBPAC. That is Ruth Bader Ginsburg Political Action Committee, and he donated tens of millions of dollars to that fund to fund the campaign. One of the differences I said I would mention is that the contributors to Hitler did not particularly wind up in office. Those contributors for Trump, several of them actually did. Elon Musk, of course, became Doge. We've all heard about that. Linda McMahon donated $21 million and became Secretary of Education. Chris Wright, the CEO of Liberty Energy, donated $235,000, became Secretary of Energy. Scott Bessent, I have to admit, I'm naive. I was surprised to find this out. I thought he was an economist, but in fact, he donated $675,000 to the campaign and then became Secretary of the Treasury. And Howard Lutnick, I'm sorry, I have no compassion for this guy, from the time that he said that those people who complain about not getting their Social Security checks are the ones who are defrauding the government, because his mother would never call or complain about it. Sorry, you lost me. But objectively, as I said, I was going to try to stay. He also donated $11.5 million to Trump's campaign, and happens now to be Secretary of the Commerce. I included Bezos and Zuckerberg because I think in today's world, the industrialists of Weimar Germany are now the tech giants of today in the United States. Thank you. So their backgrounds are similar. Their campaigns being resuscitated at the last moment, also similar. I thought, well, let me look a little bit further down the road. What else might be the same? So I looked at income inequality, the changing faces of families, and social and religious isolation. And of course, with an examination of those, one runs into the consequences. In terms of income inequality, we know that after the end of World War I, Germany went through a period of super hyperinflation. In fact, from 1918, where a loaf of bread cost 1 mark, just 5 years later, yes, the number is real, 200 billion marks for that same loaf of bread. The CPI at the time was this. If we look between 1922 and 1923, the price of things went vertical. There was nothing gradual about it at this point, which meant that some people could still get by, but for the majority of Germans, that was not the case. In fact, Gustav Crump, Alfred Crump's son, lived out the hyperinflation in this villa, lived throughout the war in this villa. Afterwards, I understand, was imprisoned in the villa for a while. His life was not so much affected by the inflation. In fact, he made tons and tons of money, while the other Germans had it not so well. Homeless shelters, overcrowded homeless shelters, people living on the street, making do with whatever they could. Families, we see this all the time. I was driving down here today and saw a group of people huddled up in the corner on the road here, and I thought to myself, I see this in Orlando, I see this in San Francisco, I see this in New York, everywhere in Germany. This was pretty much what the scene was. Who to blame for this income inequality? Well, we all know this, right? That the Germans blame the Jews. But they also blamed every other immigrant group, including the Roma, otherwise known as the Gypsies, the Poles, the communists, and they argued that it's these people who are draining the financial lifeblood out of Germany. We've got to do something about this, which is not altogether unlike what it is in the States. Some people in Miami are living in fairly comfortable, commodious accommodations, while just a few blocks away, other people are trying to make new lives under a bridge. What could cause that? This is a study by the Economic Policy of the United States. And if we look at 1970, the average CEO was earning 20 times what his average worker was making, 20 times what his average worker was making. Today, probably even worse, in 2020, that same CEO is now making 290 times what the average worker for that person is making. Where's your money going? It's not going for tips. The AFL-CIO took an even more critical look at this CEO wage inflation. Rather than averaging it, they identified particular corporations and looked at those numbers. And this is just astounding. Aptiv is a data collection company. Its CEO makes 5,000 times more than the worker they hire. Chipotle, who would have thought, 3,000 times more than that person behind the counter. Even Nike. 2,000 times what they're paying that store salesman to sell you a pair of sneakers or shirt. And Elon Musk from 2020 to 2021 increased his wealth by $316 billion. His income went vertical, not unlike what we saw in the CPI increase. Now, I understand that literally these graphs represent different things. Represents the cost, represents the income, but figuratively, I believe they represent the same thing. That is, as the cost went up, fewer and fewer people could afford this. And as this money is being sucked out of the economy, fewer and fewer people are getting by. Who to blame this time? Oh, sorry, Trump. Can't forget Trump. I just heard last week that in the time since Trump's election, he has doubled his wealth. If we look at his income from 23 to 24, it too looks like the same CPI and the same vertical escalation as we saw with Elon Musk. Where's all this money going?
Made when he went through the, yeah, I mean, he took all the big guys with him.
Look, there's one thing that isn't showing up here is that through unions, people were able to improve their living status, okay? And one of the first things that happened was
We need
gonna be-
to use these for the Zoom
well,
audience.
what ended up happening, the first thing they started destroying was unions. And by destroying the unions, people, actually, the average person vote out unions today as they did in Amazon and everything else. Once you destroy the unions, there's more money to be made on the higher level.
Once you destroy the group, the individuals fall separately, right? Who to blame for this? Thank you. Who to blame for this? While they're making that money, we, of course, are watching the stock market and our retirement savings going crash. It has, I have to be honest, it has been recovering, but it still has not gotten to 6,000 from where it fell. They're still making it, and we're still not. Who to blame for this? I keep jumping myself. So some people, as the Krupps lived in Germany during World War II, this is Jeff Bezos' house in Indian Creek, one of 15 that we know of. He also very comfortably living in a commodious accommodation while the people, more of us, are moving into places like this, which is fine with me. It's enough, it's great, I have space. But for even more of us, I'm sorry to say, we're trying to stay out of or falling into a life on the streets. Who to blame this time? It's not the Jews, it's the Venezuelan gang members. It's the Chinese doll makers who are exploiting the prices of Barbies. Or it's Maria and Jennifer Salvador, fruit pickers, who are here trying to stay off the street if they can. I also looked at, so we have similar characters, similar experience with income inequality, and I thought I would look at the changing family norms of Weimar to Hitler to today. And in the Weimar Republic, this was the ideal family: heterosexual, white, and kids, preferably Aryan kids, white, heterosexual, many. Here, 1990s, this was listed as the perfect family. Look familiar? Heterosexual, white kids, fewer kids, kids. And in the 21st century, the complexion, composition, structure of the family has changed. And we, as a culture, have taken these changes in for the longest time. We've made ourselves, accepted it as a part of life, and there it is. The family is not what it was defined as. It has changed. It has broadened. Better, worse, I'm not making that judgment. I'm just saying it's changed. We've become more inclusive, or we had become more inclusive. Even the perfect couple sold by this clothing maker was white, heterosexual. But in the 21st century, not so much. The perfect couple seems more defined on how they feel about each other than what they look like next to each other. And I think that's an expansion. This was not all that different than it was in Weimar. That is, Weimar was considered at the time the gay capital of the world. Every artist who was worth his or her salt wound up in Berlin for at least a while. This is Magnus Hirschfeld. He was the director of the Institute for Sexual Science. He was also the first German to perform a sex reassignment surgery. And unlike other same-sex couples who were tormented by the Nazis, Magnus and his partner, Carl Gies, did not suffer that kind of intimidation. In fact, they continued to work in the Institute almost throughout the end of World War II. Hitler didn't seem to bother with them all that much. There were great clubs in Germany. One of them was the El Dorado Club, and on a Friday night, this was one of the places that same-sex couples would find themselves, or whatever kind of relationship they had, at least until Hitler came to power. As soon as Hitler became president, he and Goebbels, thank you, invoked what was called paragraph 75 of the NSDAP party platform. That's a Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party. As a result of invoking that paragraph, the building was shut down and a year later taken over by the SA as one of their headquarters.
Head of the SA was gay.
The head of the, yes, Ernest Röhm has his day coming, right? So a night out with the boys in 1930 was not quite the same, was very much the same as it was for me in 1950. I hate to say it, but I remember this. I went bowling with my father on Friday night or Saturday night, and absent the military uniforms, well, we weren't that well to do, so my father wasn't wearing a tie. But what is the same here is I don't remember a woman in the bowling alley while we were all bowling there. The only woman I remember was the one who worked behind the snack counter.
Boys' night.
Boys' night out. But a boys' night out in 2010 to 2020 changed. Clubbing became a thing. And after before 1933, fine. After 1933, this would have been considered socially decadent and morally degenerate. That would have put several of these people either in jail or in re-education camps. For me, it seems the same as what's going on in Florida right now. Anybody who's not heterosexual, white, and having children is something else and somewhere else. But sad to say, not just Florida, but maybe in MAGA America, and I say that in the nicest terms I can. So the people are the same. Their campaigns resuscitated at the same time. The income inequality that both administrations experienced, the same. Family structures changing, the same. What happens as a result of this? To me, it seemed like divisiveness and hate was the product. And I couldn't wrap my mind around why. And I came up with this thought that something about inclusion causes tension. And that tension makes us vulnerable, like blowing up a balloon to a point that you don't have enough support. You get the analogy. In terms of consequences, the easiest to track is hate. From the Committee on American Islamic Relations, from 1917 to 1923, the incidents reported of either intimidation or outright crimes increased at least a third. The incidents of hate against Jews more than doubled in the same time. In fact, the Southern Poverty Law Center put together this graph that illustrated that after Trump's first election, hate amongst all of these groups increased. It seems to be that it's kind of diminishing as we're running out of victims rather than running out of energy. Anti-immigrant, anti-Black, anti-Semitic, anti-LGBTQ, anti-Muslim, and each one of those separated that way seems to be vulnerable. One group protecting itself from this hate, another group protecting itself, another group protecting itself. And of course, we know about, right, divided we fall, united we stand. So for me, DEI, in fact, matters. This is the vehicle by which people can join together and express their mutual concerns or their mutual frustration with what's going on. I thought it cynically coincidental that time would include Hitler and include Trump. And yes, I know, this is not the man of the year as in Mr. Goodbar. This is the man of the year in terms of who affected the world around you the most during that year, positively or negatively. Seems almost apropos. But as soon as I saw it, I also was reminded of a passage from Albert Speer during his interrogations at Nuremberg, where he said, the possibility of a repetition of the absolute rule by one man surrounded by weaklings must be prevented for all time to come. Never again must the path of a nation be allowed to depend so exclusively on one pair of eyes or to be determined to such an extent by the mind and abilities of a single man as was the case of Adolf Hitler. That was his confession to his interrogator. What else is the same? Once I got to that, then it was list-making time. And you can see in Germany, they disappeared people, Jews, gypsies, Roma, communists, or what they called undesirable who were essentially non-Nazi supporters. in Trump's America, we are disappearing people, right? You've seen it on the news, taken off the streets, being thrown out of their universities, having their visas revoked. Book burnings. I thought surely here would be a difference. I couldn't think of a book burning in America. Who would burn a book in America? But of course, in 2022, there was a Pastor Locke in Nashville, Tennessee, who actually organized a book burning with his parishioners. Book burning's the same, but I'm thinking in the US that book burning is going even in another direction. That is, we may not be burning the text, but we are cleaning them out of the databases. We've cleaned out people like Harriet Tubman, the Tuskegee Airmen, the Enola Gay because it had the word gay in it. LGBTQ texts off the shelves, any minority text pretty much banned, right? Oh, right, this is Florida, of course, you know that. Religious persecution, the Germans went after the Jews, and it seems, I'm not positive about this, but it seems that the Trump administration is heck bent on eliminating Muslims from the country. Yes, sir.
I was just going to add one more item to your list.
Yes.
Add one more item to your. Okay, there we go. I'd add one more item to your list. I just came back from Paris, and in recognition of the 80th year of World War II ending, part of the development of the Third Reich was the degenerates in art world, and many pieces of art were destroyed or sold to degenerate countries like the United States, but they were removed. And now I see the same pattern forming with Trump taking over the Kennedy Center, thing being banned because somebody doesn't like them rather than it's an expression of Trump. It's just one more item for your list.
I know. I asked myself in thinking about doing this, am I just going to tell them the same old thing that they know? And yes, it's absolutely true. Hitler put on what was called the Entartete Kunst, or the degenerate art show, to ridicule anything that was other than a naturalist artist, as opposed to a realist. A natural artist is someone who paints something that looks like what you're looking at. So if you look at your chair, you see a chair. A realist painter, on the other hand, understands that while I'm looking at the chair, that there are molecules and subatomic particles that are moving at nearly the speed of light. Anything that had to do with that was not natural for Hitler was degenerate. They said, you never see a cow that smiles, or so, but you're going to get me off. Religious persecution, indoctrination, cultural values, yes. I mean, I was raised Catholic, I get it. But, in fact, while I was in school, I remember in some of the schools I attended, we traveled a lot. We used to have to say the Our Father before classes started. And I always wondered about those people who were not Catholic. What were they doing while we were doing this? Also, the takeover of the Kennedy Center, controlling the arts, the culture of the time. I do have another presentation on the arts, if you're, and you can talk about that sometime. Retribution, this is right, it's everywhere on the news. Hitler exercised his retribution by outlawing all political parties that would oppose the Nazi Party. And he engaged in an event called the Night of the Long Knives, when Ernest Röhm, the head of the SA, decided that he wasn't really happy with the way the Nazi Party was going. Hitler decided it was time to get rid of this conflict, and they killed over 100 people in this one night and gave Ernst Röhm, to my understanding, the option of either killing himself or being locked away as a homosexual for the rest of his life. And we know what route he took. In the US, law firms Harvard, universities everywhere, same in Florida, right, where you're getting this. And even the Trump administration tried to declare that Act Blue, we know Act Blue is a contributing function, decided to define it as a criminal agency.
Oh, yeah, you can't call him a boss. Only the president can be called the boss.
And it goes on. The Nazis also had a program called the Lebensborn, or the youngborn, and they encouraged women, German women to have children with Nazi soldiers, to continue to raise German people. They encouraged German soldiers to have children with women in foreign countries if they had Aryan characteristics, and they believed these women could be Nazified. We didn't go quite that far. We're just offering $5,000. If you want to have another child, you know, things are tough. But doing a general estimate, it came to me that to raise a child to 18 in today's economy, $300,000. So that woman who's taken that 5,000 is either in for a big surprise or really not involved in the business at all, I would think. The most significant event during Weimar and Nazi regime was the fall of the judiciary. Once the judiciary was gone, Hitler had free reign over every part of the world he controlled. In 1933, he declared martial law and suspended the rights of everybody. I hear rumblings that maybe the 2026 election isn't really going to happen. I don't know, we're waiting to hear about that, right? For the judiciary, Hitler put in a fellow by the name of Otto Thierack, who spent a lot of time after the war in jail. In our case, we have Pam Bondi, a partisan election denier, who threatened, I'm sure you all heard on the news, we're going to investigate the investigators. Who cares whether they were right or wrong? We'll investigate them anyway. But the one that really bottomed me out was SCOTUS giving Donald Trump or any president immunity from criminal action during his time in office or for actions committed while he was in office. Going after judges, we're hearing this all the time. They don't like what the judge decides. They must be bad judges. We have to get rid of them. The Nazis had organizations to enact their laws, their rules. They used the Gestapo, Hitler's private police, the SD and the SS, and the local police to round up anybody they identified. Oh, sorry, it was open. I didn't see it. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen, right? Thank you. Yes, and for us, we have enforcement removal operations by ICE and HIS. And I don't know if you know this, but there are 255 police organizations in Florida who have signed agreements to participate in the collections of these people at their expense with ICE and HIS. 255 in Florida have agreed. So far, I've only heard of one person in Kentucky who said, no way, it ain't gonna happen. And Hitler loved tariffs. 500% the day he came in. Denmark, Norway, and the Soviet Union, who would later be one of his friends. We have, I don't know if we have tariffs today. We might have this morning, but I'm never sure by afternoon. where that is or how it stands, but I understand now there's supposed to be a 50% tariff on anything that comes out of Europe and 25% tariff on iPhones that are not exclusively made in America. Didn't he donate $1 million to that campaign? I'm sorry, it goes on. I'd like to stop. It goes on. Hitler liked parades. On his first year in office, his birthday parade had some 50,000 people involved, tanks, planes. Oh, right. That's going to happen on June 14th, I understand, is in Washington, D.C. 50,000 personnel, tanks, planes, rockets, whatever it is. And they both like presents. Goering gave Hitler on his birthday a solid gold model of sorry, what's it called? The House of German Art. Solid gold. Hitler didn't, sorry, Trump didn't get that. He got $400 million airplane from Qatar. This was new news to me. I'm sorry to share it with you. But Qatar was the same place that provided shelter for one of the masterminds of the 9/11 attack. And they are now our counterparts, our partners, our counterterrorism partners, and still provide cover for Hamas leadership today. I'm not the only one who's bringing these comparisons together. I found at the last minute, it just popped up in the Independent 2015, these same parallels are, I guess, becoming more and more obvious or more and more discussed, but ever more present. What brings these two together? Shocking. Not long ago, April 2nd, Keith Self, House representative from the 3rd District of Texas, was in a meeting. This is the URL to the link if you want to go to YouTube and see it. And in that meeting, he says, I kid you not, quoting Joseph Goebbels, the minister of propaganda, it is the absolute right of the state to supervise the formation of public opinion. Are we talking about American senators, congresspeople quoting Hitler diatribe? It's a little bit crazy for me. But there it is. How does that work? What to do? Yes, sir.
Hearst or Lindbergh doing the same thing prior to World War II in the 20s and 30s, and Ford.
I don't know. I haven't studied that. I've looked at it's a similar.
And all of those things existed. People that were worshipped in this country. People who bought the product, just like Musk's product, they bought Ford's. And he was very pro-German.
Or
You know, I did go to a presentation where people talked about how to boycott the industrialists or the companies that supported Hitler at the time, but they have become so many and have morphed in so many ways that it would be almost impossible to fully boycott any of them.
Your key question that you had throughout your presentation is who's to blame?
No, I'm hoping, sorry, let me clarify if I led you to that conclusion. I'm hoping to show that there are parallels between what was going on in Nazi Germany in Weimar Republic that led to the dictatorship of Adolf Hitler, what was going on in the United States that may have led to what may become a dictatorship here. That would include the backgrounds of the individuals, the income inequality that came about, the expanding characteristics of what's an acceptable family, those kinds of things I'm looking at in terms of parallels. Does one necessarily lead to the other? I can't make that. That's out of my league. I can't prognosticate in that way. Did I answer?
Pardon?
Did I respond to you?
I think you laid out the whole thing very good. It's just that this is repetitive.
Yes.
Please raise your hand.
Yes. I'm repetitive too. I know.
No,
Yeah. What in the, oh, I'm sorry.
Can is it? Okay. I'm going to confess ignorance before I ask this question because economics is very complicated. So there were a lot of things, of course, going on in our country prior to the pandemic. The pandemic definitely seemed to help speed up some of this stuff. But what was going on? I appreciate that the Weimar Republic was liberal and all of that. That was very insightful. But was there something that triggered, or that's a complex question,
Yes, I guess in a way.
parallels with our country? Thank you.
I'd have to reach for this. And in reaching, I would say that in COVID, it accelerated the separations of people and groups. And that made all of us vulnerable to attack from separate groups. I don't know of any single event that occurred in Weimar that moved us toward the National Socialist Workers' Party. I think it had more to do, from my review of material, is the violence at the time. I guess we're experiencing that now. The elections weren't as elections we saw here. There were people on the street beating up other people on the street. The Nazi regime had what were called beating houses. I don't know if it's because of liberalism or because of Nazi. Anybody who wasn't a Nazi. And Nazi, I'm not saying in a derogatory term. Remember, Nazi simply means it's an abbreviation for Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party. To not have to say that all the time, it's been reduced to Nazi. We hear Nazi today, I think that most of us hear Nazi today as a pejorative term, but it's really not intended as a pejorative term. It's simply an abbreviation of National Socialists.
Well, there was a pandemic right at the end of World War I. 1970 to 1919 was the pandemic for the Great Flu.
The flu. Ah,
Could we finish the presentation? I believe there's 6 more slides and then open it up to question and answer.
no, go fast. So consequences, we were talking about here. Consequences, I thought were stated fairly well by Martin Niemöller. We probably know this, right? First they came for the socialists, then the unionists, then the Jews. But today, I think it's gotten a little bit different and extended. They came for the inspector generals, they came for the journalists, they came for the immigrants, they came for the civil servants, they've come for the lawyers, Weiss, for instance, they've come for the universities, Harvard, for instance, they've come for the judges, anyone who disagrees with what the DOJ wants to have happen, and they've come for peaceful protesters. And according to NPR, they've come for truth itself. If you can't tell the truth from a lie, I can convince you of anything. I have a bridge. And if they've come for all of these, and we don't do anything about it, who's going to talk for us? Hitler invoked martial law, and that was the end of it for us, as it were. What to do? I keep coming back to this painting as one strategy for doing this. This is a painting by Oskar Kokoschka. He was he created a painting called The Degenerate Artist and was included in that Degenerate Art show. And in this painting, he's with his lover, Alma Mahler. And as I understand the painting, they are cuddling together as the turmoil of the times swirls around them, keeping them safe. And I thought, how warm and fuzzy, isn't that nice? I'd love to stay home and take care of my kids and my wife, but somehow that doesn't reach enough people. They're safe, but safe from what? Who's coming next? So I thought quickly, I don't know why it popped up, but there was an event called the Rosenstrasse protest in Berlin, where Hitler sent out his SS to round up the Jewish husbands of these German wives. Took them to a jail in Berlin, near Berlin, and instead of staying home and whining about it, these women got together and they went to the jail and they stood in front of that jail and they called for the release of their husbands, and they stood in front of that jail with SS and machine guns, and they stood there. And this is the only time that I know, I could be dead wrong about this, this is the only time that I know that Hitler directly went back on his orders. The husbands were released. So it strikes me, this is a memorial that was put up in 1980, memorializing the event. It seems to me that they have the right answer, that whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles. And by arms, I don't particularly mean Eldridge Cleaver and Black Panther. And what I'm thinking of is these Rosenstrasse women, to take arms with our neighbors, with maybe those people in the red hats, if they can put out a hand. We've got to do something overt, something affirmative. And who knows, maybe standing outside that building, something will be released. I'm still left with the question. I have not finished this investigation, and there's a lot to be discovered, I think. But I'm left with the question, how do we broaden inclusion without stimulating contraction back to tribal segregation? I want to include everybody under my tent, but the bigger I make my tent, the more buttressing it needs to keep it secure. How can we manage to do that? And that's the question I think I would leave you with at the end of this.
Yeah, I have a quick comment about
Yes.
Cheyenne's question about, what was the COVID equivalent? And I think in Germany,
Spanish flu, is that those?
I think, at the time that the Weimar Republic was formed, there were a lot of reparations to pay for World War I. And that kind of caused a lot of resentment. There were 6 million unemployed people, which is, I don't know, the equivalent of, 20 million people today or something like this.
The reparation
started and destroyed Europe in World War I, so there were a lot of reparations to pay, and Germany was kept really under the foot of all the other European countries and the United States, and that caused a lot of resentment. And that is one, right? There was,
It also caused the hyperinflation because I
exactly.
think it was 70% of the German income was shipped off to the European conquerors of World War I, and there was no way to do it. They had to get rid of the Rhineland, they had to get rid of other territories, and it just created this tension. So when Hitler came back and said, I'm not going to attend to the Treaty of Versailles, okay. No
So
one
he-
wanted to do that because they thought it would invoke another war, but
So I think there were a lot of different things, not necessarily COVID. And I don't think COVID is was the outbreak of the right-wing movement that we see today. So I think, it's very similar as you lined out beautifully. Although it's definitely not.
yeah, I think we're looking at COVID and the Versailles Treaty events as
Maybe, yeah.
big things that occurred during that time. But this kind of stuff doesn't happen overnight. It's a progression, slowly, but slowly, but slowly, but slowly. Maybe as we include, we create resistance, create resistance, create resistance. What to do? Yeah.
So,
Yes, sir.
comment on the consolidation and domination of ultra-conservative news and social media and how that might parallel with the German.
I think this is a trick question. You already know this. That is, the Nazi regime took over everything. They controlled the media. Media being radio. They took over the newspapers. They took over anything that could communicate anything anti-Nazi. I think the right-wing media today is doing the same thing. They're saying whatever it is that I want to say their leader, but I know that's the wrong word, their avatar. They will do anything they can to get there. Now, if Trump can get rid of the media, he's suing ABC News, I think, for $200 million for what he's calling a false report. He's suing about every media outlet that has anything negative to say about him. So he's kind of moving in the same way Hitler did. Let's get rid of any media that has any contradiction to what it is we're trying to do. And we'll raise up any media that supports, promotes, projects the good about what we're trying to do, even though it may not be good, right? So in that way, I think it's very parallel. And very differently, because of Hitler's time, it was essentially a month, 2 months. I think they said it took 56 days for Hitler to move from democracy to dictatorship. We're a much bigger country. It will take relatively 56 times that amount for us to get to that point. And we're doing it piece by piece. When you can't say something bad about Pam Bondi, or you can't say anything bad about Trump or Elon Musk, right? Didn't they say people who went to the Elon Musk rallies were criminals and they were interfering with the commerce of the United States? Shame on you.
Yes. Yes, sir. It seemed like the gentleman in front kind of raised this before. It seemed like a lot of this was fueled back in Germany and is fueled today by the blame game. That thing wrong, oh, it must be these individuals who are causing it. If you lose your job, oh, it's these people who took your job. Yeah, the blame game and pointing the finger, oh, it's them that are causing it. And that seems to be a human characteristic. Is there something that something in your study that you have found to really be able to counteract this in a major way?
Let me see if I understand your question. No, can you repeat that a little bit for me?
Yes, is there a way that you have found in your blame game has been able to be counteracted in a major way very quickly? In a major way?
Unification. as long as there is a small group someplace. I had a slide up here with some statistics. It's really crazy. In Hitler's Germany, it was said that the Jews were able to be blamed because most Germans, there was one, it was out of 1,000 people, only one German knew a Jew. And with that kind of relationship, it was easy to blame them because nobody knew about them. So I admit, I went to ChatGPT and I said, okay, what is the probability of a non-American, a non-Jew American knowing a Jew in America 2023? And the number came back 1/110,000th of a difference. Yes way. I'll give you the formula. I have it with me. However, the proviso there was that when I did the test again, because I said the same thing, you got to be kidding me. The numbers changed. So I went through a series of questions with them, and it wound up that the numbers came back again, just as I reported them. If we take today individuals with no TV, no social media, no phones, the numbers return to the same things that they were in the first study. So it's a simplistic answer, and I don't put much credibility in those numbers. But we do know, for instance, that the Jewish Defense League identifies that the Jewish population represents 2.4% of Americans, but it accounts for 55% of religious hate crimes. The little blue square. So get together, big groups, less chance someone's not going to know you, and less chance someone's going to take the chance of blaming you.
So
I'm sorry.
in general, revolutions happen when enough people are ticked off, not going to take it anymore. Some revolutions are fast and bloody. Some are through controlling the population and the government and taking over however you want. So recognizing that we're kind of in a revolution now, luckily one of the slower moving ones, I will give you a quote that I heard a fair number of years ago. I don't know the author. The loss of privilege feels like oppression. The loss of privilege feels like oppression. And what do you do when you're oppressed? There's a revolution.
There are indeed many parallels to that, right? So as interracial and same-sex marriages started to acquire benefits that were reserved for white heterosexual couples, all of a sudden there was less funding available for those white heterosexual couples. But I'd even go further and say that there was a revolution in 2014, 2024, that is the right were ticked off, as you say. The middle ground was not so ticked off and did not show up to vote. Somebody pointed this out today at you, right? A third, a third, a third. And because that third was not ticked off, for whatever reason, revolution. Ah, who said that? We are. That's what it's got to be. We are. There's no one else. The we. That's not a we. Wow. I feel isolated already. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Just real quick, you did the comparison with the Jewish
Yes.
1 to 10,000 or whatever. Today, okay, today it's more the immigrants. I can personally say we live in a liberal. I know I have many Jewish friends, but I don't think I know any immigrants. So that there's a parallel there too. It's easier to not like that person or say there are problems because I don't know any of them. Have you done any comparisons with that population like you did with the Jewish population? I'm curious.
No, because It's a very interesting question, and I would correct myself if I led you to that, to the conclusion that the numbers of Jews in relation to the general population targeted Jews in America. That does not seem to be the case today. What I was hoping to illustrate was the smaller the numbers and the more isolated the group, the more vulnerable they are to attack. And that would put us into the immigrant communities where for this or that reason, they can't publicly represent themselves, and that makes them vulnerable.
Yeah, sure.
So sorry if I misled you in that way.
Parallel in my head, with those are the people that the Trump administration is deporting and disappearing.
Yes, I guess if I were to look in that to today, I would probably look at Muslim and Palestinian populations and what they represent in the United States. I would suspect that those numbers are relatively small as well, and thus targetable.
I have one really quick, am I on? Quick question. Are you still allowed to teach this? No, I'm really serious.
I'm retired. I'm retired. I just taught it today. Thank you very much. I don't know if I will do today.